for your continued support. Now, to moderate our next inspiring discussion, welcome to the stage ACID's President and CEO, Sid Wilson.
All right. Yes, soy dominicano de pura cepa hasta tambora, so I gotta have some Tony Rosario. And we're in New York City. So welcome to our Hacer Symposium Luncheon, and we're so excited for what we're gonna have today, a fireside chat with me and the Chief Executive Officer of Televisa Univision, Wade Davis. But before we begin our fireside chat, I do want to make some very important acknowledgments. We're so proud that our luncheon sponsor is Marriott International. And that's not necessarily by accident. It is a recognition that during the pandemic, Marriott International stood with Hacer and many organizations when they had a very difficult period, and we want to make sure that we were partnering with them, but there's no group that was more impacted by the pandemic than our servers and the staff at many of our hotels and staff. And so I want to first make sure that we recognize those that are serving our place. They are on the sides here, our servers that came back because they came back for us. We want to acknowledge them. Un aplauso for our servers, our housekeepers, everyone that has been supporting us who came back during this pandemic, and we stand with you. Absolutely. Un aplauso for all of our servers. Give them applause. It wasn't that long ago that I was a server, so I know what you were going through. So just know that you're my people. We are all your people. So thank you for our servers and everyone that has been helping our servers, our farm workers, and many others that bring our food to our plates. I also want to recognize the fact that Hacer is powered by an amazing, inspiring board of directors. I'd like for our board of directors of Hacer to please stand up and be recognized. Our Hacer board of directors, who are in the room, please stand up and be recognized. Thank you so much. And I do want to give special recognition for my immediate predecessor, Carlos Horta, who was the president and CEO for Hacer. So thank you so much, Carlos, for your leadership as well. Thank you, Carlos. And I also want to recognize so many of our Latinos who are veterans. American GI Forum is one of our coalition members, but I know that there are many that are here in this room who have served our country and protect our freedom. So if you are a veteran, please stand up and be recognized. Thank you. Thank you for your service. And at Hacer, we want to make sure that we are inclusive for everyone in our community. And you'll notice that we have ASL interpretation, and please thank our ASL team that is working hard to make sure that everyone can hear the message of what we're doing for advancing Hispanic inclusion in corporate America. All right. So with that, let's get started. It's a great honor and privilege to introduce our special guest for our luncheon today. He is someone that I've gotten to know ever since he joined his role as the Chief Executive Officer of Televisa Univision. He is no stranger to the media industry and someone that brings immense knowledge and wisdom into his role now leading one of our nation's largest Spanish language television networks and in terms of the library and all the things that Televisa Univision does. So I'm so honored and privileged to introduce a big welcome to the Chief Executive Officer of Televisa Univision. Please welcome Wade Davis.
Boy Biggie, now I live on Billboard, and I brought my boys with me. Say what up to Tata, still sipping my top, sitting courtside, Knicks and Nets give me high five. I be spiked out, I could trip a referee, tell by my attitude that I most definitely.
All right.
Everybody else is having lunch. I got tricked. I got invited to lunch, and I have to sit on the stage.
I'll tell you, that's stage life, Wayne. There we go. But we will make sure that we will feed him. We will feed him something well. So thank you. So first of all, Wade, thank you so much for being here. And you know, we're so excited for this chat. Because you have you joined Televisa Univision as Chief Executive Officer during as the company went through the transition to become the company that it is today. But my first question is, tell me why Televisa Univision, given your 25 years of industry experience?
Well, it started as Univision. Televisa Univision came a little later, but. Well, it starts where all Spanish language media stories start, which is in rural northern Vermont. I grew up in rural. Oops, that's a lot of mic, huh? I grew up in rural northern Vermont, the well-worn path from the backwoods of Vermont to Miami in Spanish language media. But I think it's relevant for this discussion because you know, we're here to talk about diversity, and I grew up in rural Vermont. I was a philosophy and religion major. I ended up being the CFO of Viacom. I've never had an accounting course in my life.
Wow.
Never went to business school. And a lot of the success that I've had in business, I think, really comes from looking at things differently in a business context. I think probably like a lot of us, I've always had like imposter syndrome, right? Like, do I belong in this room with all these, you know, fancy people who went to business school? I don't know the language that they're talking about, you know. And over time, embracing that difference and being frankly fearless about the ideas and perspectives that you can bring to the table, notwithstanding your differences, I think has really served me, you know, me well in my career. I was a banker for a while. I left banking to become an education entrepreneur, and then I joined Viacom. I sold those companies to join Viacom. Actually, you know, I was thinking about it on my way here because I'm living in Miami now. Viacom's right next door, and it was almost 20 years to the day. It's actually 20 years, less 10 days that I showed up to work there, and I lived in this hotel for like, you know, months until I could find a place to live. But anyway, so I joined Viacom, and I was in general market media for, you know, an interesting time really, where we saw consolidation, we saw globalization, we saw the launch of streaming. And, you know, I was there to see all of that happen in the general market. And it was it really was a time that was dominated probably by those things. A lot of consolidation, a lot of the big general market media companies began to dominate globally, whereas the local media companies were either consolidated or kind of, you know, faded into secondary positions. And then obviously streaming became, you know, a very significant platform in which people started consuming media. And so when we sold Viacom to CBS, and I stepped back and I looked at, like, what are big market opportunities? And you looked at the Spanish-speaking global economy. And, you know, interestingly, a lot of those things had not happened for the Spanish-speaking economy, right? You still, on a global basis, really had markets that were dominated by, you know, individual market-leading broadcasters. That was the case in the US with Univision. It was the case in Mexico with Televisa. Just go through the rest of the world. You have one or two media companies in these Spanish-speaking countries. And consequently, there wasn't really enough scale for any of these companies to compete against the general market media companies that were kind of dominating globally and frankly, just bringing pretty homogenous homogenous voices to the same streaming service, the same action, entertainment, whatever it was, right? And so, it was really an observation that this massive market, right? Spanish is the most widely spoken language, native language in the world outside of China. And nobody was thinking about serving, this audience that had very strong cultural cross currents through it. And in the US in particular, I didn't realize this, and still the same, most people don't realize that the largest Spanish-speaking market in the world, by far, is the United States. It's a bigger market than Mexico, it's a bigger market than Spain. And so when you think about a business opportunity, at least for things that I knew how to do, it was an extraordinary business opportunity, right? It was fragmented. Nobody had really thought about how do you put together a business that's at scale, that has the resources to invest in, launching a global streaming service that can compete with, the world's biggest companies, frankly, and doing so in a way that was kind of by Latinos for Latinos, and really celebrating the essence of, Spanish language culture, across both an elevated linear platform and a streaming platform. So that's kind of the meandering journey, but ultimately, it was an extraordinary business opportunity for us, and that's how I got here.
That's great. One of the topics we've been discussing, and something that Hacer does a lot, is when we are interacting with CEOs and really calling on them to do more in terms of DEI. But what are your words of wisdom for other companies as they address the environment that is challenging DEI itself?
That seems like a setup. I'm not sure I have words of wisdom. Seems like look, I mean, we're here. I mean, we're here in this forum, right? I mean, your organization itself has corporate and responsibility in its name, right? Yeah. At the end of the day, we are here as business people. And so when you think about DEI in the context of that, I mean, at the end of the day, we have businesses to run, right? And we also need to essentially hold ourselves to account for the things that are right and important. In our world, where all we think about is the Spanish-speaking consumer, and then when I extrapolate that to other people's businesses, right, because they do think that is the context we have to, D&I and the challenges D&I face in a corporate context, we do always have to remember that we're running businesses. And the lens through which we think of everything is about that consumer. And so anybody who, I can't speak to other industries, but I certainly can see the lens through which we engage with our business partners. And at the end of the day, as I said, this is the largest, just talking about the US here, this is the largest Spanish-speaking market in the world. The Spanish-speaking economy in the United States is now larger than the UK economy, right? And when you think about, again, I'm just going to, again, we all look at the world only through our own lenses, but when we think about just, let's say, the advertising side of our business, coming from the general market, where I ran the advertising business at Viacom as well, only about half of the US advertisers who advertise on television are doing so in Spanish. I mean, it's mind-blowing when you think about that there is this massive market the size of the UK economy, and only half of the companies who think about engaging consumers because that's their core business are doing so in Spanish, right? And so back to really the essence of your question, which is, okay, well, if we're thinking about D&I through a corporate lens, there's really a couple big areas of constituencies. There's your employees and there's your customers, right? And so if you're saying, well, I got a business to run and there's this massive market, and by the way, only half of my competitors are even thinking about talking to them in Spanish, maybe that's going to be an easier place to go look at growing our business, you know, in a world where the economy is hard and growth is hard to find. And so if you think about it from that standpoint, it's almost like you have to reverse engineer how you engage your customers in a really authentic way. And so reverse engineering that back to your employee base that knows how to do that, right? I mean, when I meet with, you know, the CEOs of the largest, you know, consumer-facing companies in the world, frankly, but in the US, and we talk about this market opportunity, they all get it. Oh my God, I can't believe we're not doing more here. They call up 10 people, those 10 people, you know, their schedules get, and they launch on a whole thing. And only about half of the times that we have those incredible meetings where the CEO is really like, this is a really important part of our strategy, or should be a really important part of our strategy going forward, does it really get executed? And the reason it doesn't get executed is because after it goes down a level and everybody talks about how important it is, it just kind of dissipates because it's just hard to do. General market employee, like, you know, oh, I gotta go create a campaign in Spanish. I don't know who to call. I don't even know what that campaign says. Like, is it consistent? Like, and so it's all, that's where the breakdown occurs. And so that's what I mean when you have to almost like reverse engineer executing something that's authentic and meaningful for the customers that you want to go get. I was talking to another, I mean, one of the top 3 largest companies in the world yesterday, and they were talking about how big, this is the CEO, how big of a priority the US Hispanic customer base is, how far behind they are. And one of the things that we almost just realized that like in that meeting is they don't even have locations in Spanish-speaking, like highly dense Spanish-speaking communities. Okay, like, they may be advertising, they may be thinking about product, but the fact that nobody's even thought to execute retail community presence. So anyways, a very long-winded answer to what you're saying, but I mean, I think ultimately these are business opportunities. In my world, this is an enormous business opportunity for us to try and engage the Hispanic consumer. It's, you know, and if you really want to do that, you have to work backwards to thinking about making sure that your staff and your employee base knows how to do that and execute that on an authentic basis.
Well, I'm really glad that you share that because, you know, certainly from the lens of a media company, you can see that whether you're in media, whether you're in oil and gas or retail or banking or finance, you know, we have to always think about how do we make sure that we're thinking about everything we're doing inclusive. And you shared something that's very important that, you know, half the companies don't even think about connecting to Latinos in our language. And I often share with companies, if you want to talk to us in a language we understand, it goes to our head. When we speak to us in our language, it goes to our heart. And if you want to speak to our heart, habla español. You know, and so, and this is so important, even if we are English proficient. And,
well, but actually, yeah. I mean, it's even worse than that, Sid.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to.
Oh no, please.
I'm sure you had another question. I don't know if it is, but like,
no, please.
When you actually deconstruct that half, you know, the biggest challenges that we face in terms of parity around that are in places that are frankly basic human rights, right? Like when you look at pharma massively under-indexes their spend in Spanish against U.S. Hispanics for conditions that over-index U.S. Hispanic. So if you look at financial services, if we're 20% of the population and frankly the vast majority of economic growth, only about 3 to 5% of their marketing budget is spent targeting these consumers. Okay, fine, we can have this debate, oh, the great business opportunity. But some of this stuff, it's like, I mean, it's offensive because it's not just about what is compelling to you, like in your heart. It's like, think about how complicated financial services and pharma ads are in English. There's all this fine print. People are talking fast to make these disclaimers, and like, these. It's just basic. Like, they deserve to know that there's a drug that is, can address their condition. I mean, so anyway, I mean, I think it goes beyond in a lot of ways, but that, where that breaks down again is the fact that the right employees are not in the right places, because these are smart people who are highly driven by the profit motive, but there's just breakdowns because there's monolithic thinking in these employee bases that cause massive, frankly, highly unjust outcomes.
Well, that gives me a good segue into employees, and I want to talk about how you were able to build the team that you have. Not only your team, but Televisa Univision has 3 Latinos on the board, 2 of whom are Latinas. 2 of whom I have a dear relationship, Oscar Munoz and Giselle Ruiz, and I was hearing backstage that you have a great team member, Dinah Diaz, of course we've known for many years, and Pilar Ramos, your general counsel, and tell us about your strategy for really building the team that you need to take Televisa Univision to the next level.
Well, I mean, when we took over the business at the end of 2020, we had a completely different strategy, right? I would describe. We wanted to build the world's largest Spanish language media, multi-platform content and media company, and we were starting with, a U.S. broadcaster that had been in decline and had no digital presence, didn't control or own any of its content. And so, like in any business execution, you got to find the right team, has the right skills to go execute the strategy that you have. And the team that I took over, at the time, it was the executive leadership team was 70% white male who didn't speak Spanish. And you go back to where I kind of started the conversation. I had this real imposter. Okay, all right, shit, now what do I do? I had to run this. And I had seemed like a good idea on paper. Like, now I got to go execute this. I got this Spanish language media company to run. I didn't speak a word of Spanish until I did this, working hard on it. And so, of course, the first thing I need to go do is I need to get the right team, people that know how to do this, that know how to understand the content, understand the consumer. And so we flipped all of that. I mean, when we bought the company, there were 19 board members. Only 3 of them were not white men. We now have 10 board members. So you said there are 3 U.S. Hispanics, but the majority of the board is Latinos, right? Because remember, we want a board that's reflective of the customers we're serving. We have a Mexican business as well as a U.S. business, but only 3 of those 10 board members are white men, and unfortunately I'm one of them, but there's not much I can do about that in the short term. So that was really important to me. So we flipped the staff. I mean, the executive staff is now 65% native Spanish speakers. So that's a huge. We've hired over the last 2 years almost 780 people. 580 of those people are Latinos.
That's big.
So but again, it's just business, right? Like, I look at this, I can't do that. I can't do what I set out to do without the right team in place. I didn't set out to do this because I wanted some D&I, a gold star on my, D&I progress chart. I had a business challenge that I needed to solve, and I needed to get the right people in place. And if you truly think about it objectively, as I said, starting with a customer-centric approach, and how am I going to staff this organization to deliver on the customer promise, those are the people that deserve to be hired.
You know, I'm so glad you shared that as well because I hope everyone hears the fact that even in your industries, that we know that there is an opportunity. So you literally change the culture completely in order to make sure you're addressing the growing, Latino community. And every company in every industry can do that, and it takes that leadership. And so, thank you for what you're doing. And hope everyone heard that. Before I ask my next question, just to give everyone just some housekeeping, is that if anyone has any questions for Wade, we welcome you to raise your hand, and members of our team are going to give you a card to ask questions. So it's even the ones that are by team members that are waving. So if anyone has any questions, just raise your hand while I'm talking to Wade, and then you can ask the questions, and they'll bring them up here to me to ask for Wade. So Wade, here's my one of my maybe next to last question before we go to Q&A.
Did you say last or next?
No, second.
Okay.
To last. So
all right. Just got to pace myself.
Yeah, pace yourself. So what are your thoughts on the future of media given the rise of streaming and other non-traditional formats? Because we've seen such a dramatic evolution in this space.
It's highly stressful as a media company CEO. It is not an easy time to be in the media business. But I would say from an audience standpoint, it's a great time to be in the media business. There's an unprecedented amount of high-quality content that you can consume in new places more easily than ever. I mean, when I look at this stuff all the time, but it's actually extraordinary. People are now spending somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 14 hours a day consuming media.
Wow. Per day.
And they can do that because of new formats. People are at work, they're listening to a podcast, right? People are watching TV, they're on social media. People are playing video games, they're listening to music, right? I mean, so it's almost like, there's this massive crescendo of media consumption. For us in our kind of little world, the thing that it's really enabled for us is largely around the launch of our streaming platform. Streaming allows us to do interesting things for the audience that we really can't do on broadcast television because of technological limitations, but also just because of business limitations, right? So broadcast television is measured by Nielsen. We sell ads based on Nielsen, and so we have to cume the largest audience that's available at that moment in time to sell the most ads, and so we have to program to what we think is the biggest group of people and what they might want to see at that moment in time. By the way, talking about pacing, don't get me started about measurement. I mean, so when you talk about some of the outrageous unconscious bias that exists in some of these, some of these consumer-focused companies, we now know with certainty that, so Nielsen is a panel-based methodology in which Nielsen supposedly goes out into the wild and finds 30,000 households that are supposed to be representative of, the entire population. Surprise, surprise, there's been an extraordinary amount of bias in the composition of putting those sample households together away from U.S. Hispanics, right? Because people don't want to let them into their house to install monitoring equipment.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a lot of mobility in Hispanic households. So you have some statistical flaws, which is, okay, now you're measuring a subset of this population, so that just has statistics, issue. You have a smaller subset of this panel projecting out the entire population. But now, as Nielsen has had to evolve to really include connected device viewing, mobile viewing, web viewing, and they now have Nielsen plus, what they call Nielsen plus big data. We now know for a fact, because they had to go back and publish everything and look at the, and basically compare the two methodologies, that U.S. Hispanic viewership has been systemically underreported since the dawn of television to the tune of about 30%.
Wow.
What follows that viewership? Investment in content and also advertisers wanting to reach those audiences. It's outrageous. But anyway, I know I'm running out of time, and I'm sorry for that digression.
No, this is
it
important.
drives me insane. And as we move to more measurable platforms like streaming, where we don't have to rely on a Nielsen panel-based methodology to extrapolate who might be watching at a moment in time, because we're actually serving content to an IP address, we solve some of those problems. The other thing that we're able to do is we're not limited by that same construct where we have to cume an audience at one moment in time. We just have to reach an audience at some point. We have much more shelf space, so that opens us up to new programming formats. It allows us to think about programming to a highly nuanced and complicated U.S. Hispanic audience in a much more sophisticated way. I mean, so, we could never put Argentine soccer on broadcast television. It's just not a big enough audience to cume, on the big reach platform. But I will tell you, the Argentines in the room, they will pay anything to see professionally produced, announced by an Argentine, soccer in the United States of America, not bootlegged on YouTube. And that works great from a business standpoint, right? So now we have this platform that doesn't have those constraints. And so we can really think much more broadly about delivering content propositions that, really allow us to access new audiences that otherwise weren't, frankly, being served by Mexican-centric broadcast television. And if we don't do it, nobody's going to do it. And so now we have the latitude, because some of these business parameters, like, sorry for my rant about Nielsen, but some of those business parameters and constraints are changing, and we don't have the same technological challenges.
Well, so my final question before I start getting questions from Q&A, and you kind of were sharing this just now, but what else is next for Televisa and what do we see next coming ahead in terms of what your plans are for the future?
Well, we're just getting started, right?
Yeah.
So we launched VIX a little more than a year ago. And so it's still a baby.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've come a long, long way, but you think about, Netflix has been around for more than a decade. Most of the other major streaming services have been around for more than 5 years. So, so there's still a lot of work to do to grow and mature that platform. We have to continue. We're unlike all other media companies, really, in the universe. We're going to continue to invest in linear television. We believe in linear television. I spent some time talking about what streaming allows us to do, but linear television is incredibly important for our audience. We have more people watching our linear television free over the air than any other network in the United States. So we're going to continue to invest in linear television. I would say we have a really important thing coming up, which is a U.S. presidential election.
Very important.
And I think it's really, really important for us to make sure that that our audience is educated, that our audience is engaged, and that they're empowered, frankly, to have a voice in that election. We've made a lot of changes to our news product. We thought it was very important strategically to actually bring the Univision News to the center. You probably saw for the first time in the history of Univision, we co-hosted a Republican debate. And look, I think in general market, it's fine if you want to watch Fox News or if I want to watch MSNBC, because that might be my politics. But in Spanish language news, where we represent 60+% of the viewership, we got to make sure that it's a centrist news. We can have political commentary on one side. We should have political commentary on the other side. So we're expanding our news coverage. We're bringing the hard journalism to the center. We're making sure that we have space for commentary from both sides of the aisle. But probably most importantly, on top of that platform, we have to really, and for whoever's in the audience, we need people to engage on this. We're going to try and engage everyone in the industry. But there's an imperative to get people registered to vote and get the people who are registered out to actually vote. Because even in these battleground states that historically you don't think of as heavily Hispanic, the Hispanic population represents the swing vote. So it is the time for the Hispanic population in the United States said this is an economy the size of the UK. This is a population that represents almost 100% of the economic growth of the country going forward. 25% of everyone under 25 is U.S. Hispanic. This is the future of the country, and this population needs to make their voice heard in deciding what is probably the most important U.S. presidential election in a long time.
Absolutely. This is so great, and I'm so thankful for what you're sharing, because I think that what Wade has shared so far, I think maybe eye-opening for many of you in the audience who may be surprised by some of this data. And so again, we hope you're able to take this back to your companies. So our team gathered some questions from the audience, and one question is actually to you personally. But I think you're gonna like the questions that what are your success habits? In other words, what are the habits that you do as a CEO that, and I ask these CEOs these questions too, like, what is your habit for effectiveness as a chief executive officer?
Nobody wants to follow my habits. I don't know why everybody assumes that just because I can put on a three-piece suit and come string some sentences together, the rest of it's not a shit show. I don't know, man. We all wake up. It's a work in progress every day, isn't it? I mean, it's hard out there. We wake up, and what are we going to do better today that we didn't do the day before? And look, I think if I have any, if there are, any superpowers that I have, I would say that, and this one sounds like a platitude, but I work really hard. I drive my team crazy. I probably should do less of that. So like I said, I'm not sure why people are thinking that like my habits are like good habits. So I'm relentless. And one of the things that I do as a CEO that I don't think, again, and you can debate whether these are good things or bad things, because there are a lot of people who probably are way more successful than I am that do the opposite. But I really focus on the details. I really think it's important to, if somebody's going to write a presentation and present it to me, I'm going to read every single word of that, and I'm going to engage them in every single thing that they're saying as part of that. A lot of people say maybe the CEO should be a little bit higher level, but that's my style. And then the other thing is that I try and make sure that, and this does go back, I think, to a little bit to where we started, which is around the value of diversity in corporate America, which is you know, unless there's respect and open-mindedness, you're never going to create the space for the best ideas to bubble up. And, you know, the success that I had earlier in my career in which people, you know, I brought new ideas, and those new ideas and new ways of thinking were the currency that I traded on to get ahead. And now that I'm in a position where, you know, in a lot of respects, I'm really more the consumer of the ideas as opposed to the generator of the ideas. I need to really remember that. I need to really remember that it's impossible for me as one person to be the generator of the ideas that's going to, you know, drive a massive enterprise. My job is just literally to filter up the information and to try and synthesize, you know, the information and the ideas to, you know, to actionable steps for a large enterprise. And so unless you create that space for the ideas and, you know, check your own ego, because sometimes you can almost convince yourself that, oh, I had that great idea. It's really, really important. So those are the two things, I think, man. I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but I work really hard. I get up early. I make sure that I take every single thing that I'm doing in any given moment, put 100% of my effort into it, and then I try and remind myself to stay humble, not just because it's a good thing to do, because it's the ego that gets in the way of creating space for other people's ideas.
I hope everyone heard that, because I can tell you that thank you, because that's a conversation that I often have a lot with CEOs in terms of just you know, having that humbleness and being able to be open to, you know, to hearing from your team members and yes, and working hard, and you have a company to run, which is so important when we think of performance. So my last question here, and I was just looking through some of the questions, is, and this is a question maybe not specific for Televisión, but maybe your message to, you know, to many of the companies that are here is, from your perspective, how do you foster inclusivity and belonging in the workplace? I mean, you kind of talked about what you did to, you know, to really bring, you know, that correct culture to align to your strategy. But how can other companies think about fostering that culture of inclusion and belonging in the workplace?
Well, look, belonging and inclusion, you know, I think that the two things that business people can think about when they think about, you know, addressing those issues,
yeah,
you have to think about culture, but you also have to think about process. You know, you think about the operating system of how an enterprise works, right? What are the rituals? What are the meetings? What are the ways in which people, you know, as a kind of filter information through? Who participates in those? How are the decisions, you know, made? Does it need to be written down, or do these things get done in informal conversations? These are all things that every enterprise has, but a lot of times people are not intentional about them, right? A lot of times people are just like, every company has an operating system, but people just don't call it that. They don't necessarily know it, and they didn't necessarily design it, right? And you know, it just makes sense that when you say, okay, I have a business strategy. What's that business strategy? Oh, it's going to go do that thing. All right, well, do I have the right people who can go do that right thing? Okay, yeah, I got the right people. Are those people, do they have the right jobs? Are those jobs defined in the right way? Okay, I think so. Are those people resourced properly to go do what they need to? If you answer yes to all those questions, then the other stuff, that's the operating, that's the kind of the hardware, right? Humans in boxes in a configuration that's supposed to yield an outcome. The software, the operating system, every enterprise has it. Like I said, it's the way in which people communicate. What are the meetings? What are the rituals? What are the processes? And so process, I think, is really important.
Right.
And you got to be deliberate about that. And obviously, it fits hand in glove with culture, right? You can't say that we have an open-minded, meritocracy in which you don't let people talk at meetings, right? You can't say that we're a meritocracy and not see high performers promoted over time. Like, I mean, so it's that operating system that I think, you know, is really, really important and often neglected, so neglected and not really delivered in a lot of enterprises.
You know, well, thank you. And as we wrap up this session, you know, when you and I first, first met, I told you my story of how when I was just a student at the Ohio State University, you know, at that time there was no Spanish language program on the cable at all, and I was this young student who said, you know, I want Luncheon in the, you know, in Spanish language, and the cable company said no. So I launched a petition drive within campus, and that petition drive just went viral before the word viral ever happened. And eventually the university got involved. I know Yolanda Cepeda, who's Ohio State's here, is in the room. And then the neighboring colleges got aligned. The Ohio State legislature then stepped in, they got involved. Governor George Voinovich at the time then got involved. It took all of that before they finally said, okay, we changed our mind. And then we finally were able to make that happen. So anyone that's from Central Ohio that's getting Spanish language television, you're welcome.
Well, I have a job for you.
Yeah.
So,
but
I gotta give you Bob Iger's number. Hulu is the only distributor in America that doesn't have a Spanish language offering.
Well, we have to make sure that we're addressing that. So
we'll give you their number. Sounds like you have the playbook.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Wayne, this has been such a great privilege, and we're so thankful for your time and your leadership and the culture that you have created and the team that you have built. And the important message that you're sharing here. So can everyone here please give another big aplauso to Wade Davis, the Chief Executive Officer for Televisa Univision. Thank you so much. All right, I gotta give him a hug. Absolutely. So thank you. So this, of course.